I hated the morning. Not the sunlight. I always loved the light coming over the apartment windowsill. But the ritual. The morning ritual was always when the fog was thickest. My hand would shake, trying to get those 8 tiny pills out of the plastic organizer Sarah had set up. 8 pills. 7 bottles yesterday. 8 today. Every month, Dr. Jenkins found something new I needed. A pill for my heart, a pill for the acid burning my throat at night, and 2 pills for the worry. The worry was the worst. It came because of the forgetting. I was only 71. I wasn't ready to let go. I looked at the pills on the counter. Red, white, blue, yellow. A rainbow of confusion. Sarah would stand right next to me. She watched me swallow them every morning with the same tight, impatient look. "Swallow, Mom. All of them," she'd say, tapping her foot. I tried to tell her. I told Dr. Jenkins, too. "Doctor, I think these pills are making me sick. Not physically sick, but cloudy." Dr. Jenkins, a young man with a thin mustache, who always smelled faintly of antiseptic and coffee, just smiled over his prescription pad. "Margaret, at your age, some cognitive decline is expected. We're simply treating the symptoms. The pills are essential for your stability. Now let's add a little something extra for that bladder leakage, shall we? You don't want an embarrassing accident." He made the bladder pills sound like a blessing. I hated those embarrassing little accidents. So I nodded. I always nodded. I took the pills, but the forgetting got worse. Time flies. When you're old, they say. But for me, time was slow and thick, like cold molasses. I felt like I was wading through it. I used to be sharp. I was Maggie Miller, a seamstress. I ran the big steam press down at the Des Moines laundromat for 30 years. I could tell you the tensile strength of 3 different fabrics just by touching them. My hands knew the stitch count on anything I ever sewed. Precision. That was my pride. Now I was afraid to put toast in the toaster. I'd stand in the kitchen staring at the bread, trying to remember if I already ate breakfast. Did I take my heart pill? I'd look at the organizer Sarah filled, empty on Monday. But maybe I missed Monday and Tuesday. The fear would seize me, icy cold, and I'd often double dose just to be safe. That way, I knew. I hadn't missed it. I relied on Sarah completely. She came every day after her shift as a nurse's assistant to check on me. She controlled my schedule, my food, and my pills. I knew she was busy. Her life was hard, rushing around Des Moines. She always talked about needing more money, always sighing about the cost of living. "You're a real handful, Mom," she'd often tell me, not exactly smiling. I'd apologize, feeling guilty for being a burden. The apartment, this tiny 2-bedroom place, was all I had left of my life with Robert. It was paid off, a safe harbor. The thought of leaving it made my chest tight. I used to joke with Robert. "They'll have to take me out of here," over my dead body. That promise felt very real now. I didn't want to end up in one of those cold nursing homes, staring at white walls until I forgot my own name. The biggest fear was that I truly was losing it. I'd see my own confusion mirrored in Sarah's eyes, the exasperation, the pity. One Tuesday morning, she came in with a fresh refill bag from the pharmacy. I always preferred Mrs. Henderson's independent chemist across the street. But Sarah insisted on using the big chain pharmacy near her job. "They have better prices, Mom. You need to save money," she'd said. Sarah opened the pill organizer, the plastic smell fresh and sharp. She dumped the little red and white capsules into the Monday slot. I watched her fingers move, fast and practiced, sorting 8 days' worth of doses. I saw a bottle sitting separate on the table. It was small, white, and didn't have a proper label yet. "What's that one, dear?" I asked, pointing. My voice sounded thin, like dry tissue paper. Sarah jumped slightly. She grabbed the bottle, covering the top with her hand. "Oh, nothing, Mom. Just a prescription for Gary. He asked me to pick it up on my way." Gary. That name again. He was Sarah's new friend, a lawyer or an accountant. I couldn't quite remember which. Sarah met him a few months ago, right about the time my memory really started to fail. "Just Gary's medicine, Mom. Now I have to go," Sarah said, giving me a quick, cold kiss on the cheek. She zipped the organizer shut and placed it next to my bedside water pitcher, exactly where I could reach it later. I didn't think about it again until late that night. I woke up, dizzy and sweating. The anxiety medication Dr. Jenkins gave me for sleep, diphenhydramine, I think it was called, usually knocked me out like a hammer. But tonight I was awake. My heart was thumping hard, not from worry, but physically hard against my ribs. I crept out of bed to get a glass of water, trying not to wake Sarah, who was sleeping on the couch tonight. She often did, saying she needed to monitor me. As I shuffled past the living room doorway, I saw her. Sarah was sitting upright on the sofa, bathed in the blue glow of her phone screen. She was whispering, her voice low and frantic. I stopped dead in the shadows of the kitchen doorway. "It's getting worse, Gary," Sarah muttered into the phone. "She forgot my name for a full minute yesterday. The doctor says it's progression, but it makes my life impossible." A terrible lump formed in my throat. She sounded so annoyed, so burdened. Then came the knife. "We need the money from that apartment, and she can't stay here much longer," Sarah hissed. "The appraiser is set for next week. Just 3 more weeks of this, and we can file the power of attorney. Just 3 weeks, Gary." The shock sliced through the fog in my brain like lightning. Apartment, money, file the POA. It wasn't just old age frustrating her. It wasn't just the burden of care. She was calculating. She was counting the days until she could kick me out and take my house, my home. She wants me gone. The realization was cold and deep. Sarah suddenly went silent. She must have heard the small, involuntary gasp I let out. She hung up the phone instantly, the blue light vanishing. She stood up, her eyes wide with animal panic, staring right into the dark kitchen where I stood. "Mom, were you listening?" she demanded, her voice hard and sharp, not the saccharine, sweet voice she used during the day. I stumbled back, leaning against the cold refrigerator. I tried to speak, but only a dry whisper came out. "Apartment. Gary." The panic flashed in her eyes for a moment, stark and real, before she slapped on that sickening fake smile. It looked like a mask, ugly and tight. She walked toward me slowly. "I was just going over the finances, Mom. The cost of that nice nursing home consultation. It's astronomical." She lied, her voice falsely gentle, laying a cold, heavy hand on my arm. "Don't worry your pretty head. We are getting you set up for the future. Soon you won't have to worry about anything at all." The way she said that last line, it was meant to be comforting, but it sounded like a threat, a final sentence. It confirmed everything. Her help wasn't help. It was maintenance until the transaction was complete. I backed away from her hand, shaking my head slightly. Was she trying to help me survive? Or was she relying on me failing completely? I wasn't sure. But in the panic of the moment, I knew that my decline wasn't upsetting my daughter. It was making her rich. She wanted my clarity gone. I tried to focus, clinging to the last shreds of my memory, the precision of a seamstress. I needed something solid, something real that wasn't just my imagination failing me. I looked down at the weekly pill organizer Sarah had filled for me that morning, all 8 pills waiting in the little plastic box for the next few days. I bent my head closer to the box. I noticed a faint, bitter chemical scent coming from the organizer. It was never there before. The smell of plastic, yes. But this was sharper. Metallic, almost. I looked back up, but Sarah was already gone, hurrying out the door and into her car. I heard the engine start, and the tires squeal slightly as she pulled away. She was in a terrible rush, probably to go meet Gary. I reached for the organizer, feeling an overwhelming dread seize my gut. Did that smell mean anything? Was it just the new bladder pill? Or was there something else in that plastic box? Something Sarah was doing to make sure I never regained my independence. I pulled out the bottle of the sleep aid, the one that knocked me flat every night. I held the bottle up to the weak kitchen light, reading the label over and over. Diphenhydramine. I tried to remember what Mrs. Henderson, my sharp-as-a-tack neighbor who used to be a pharmacist, had once told me about these sleep pills. Something about seniors, something about crossing a barrier. I felt a profound, chilling certainty that wasn't confusion at all. The pills were supposed to help me sleep, but I realized they were the reason I couldn't wake up. Not truly. Not inside my own mind. They weren't healing me. They were hiding me. The morning after I heard Sarah talking on the phone, the fog felt thicker than ever. I felt dizzy, and my heart was still hammering from the shock. It wasn't just old age anymore. It was betrayal. That cold realization was the only clear thing left in my mind. Sarah acted like nothing happened. She brought me oatmeal and watched me take my 8 morning pills. Red, white, blue. She waited until they were down my throat. Her smile was too wide, too quick. It made me sick. I hated myself for needing her, for being so helpless. I was Maggie Miller, a woman who could fix anything with a needle and thread. Now, I couldn't even trust my own brain. But a seamstress notices patterns. I started thinking back. When did the fog get so bad? It was about 8 months ago, right after Dr. Jenkins added the little blue pill for the bladder leakage, oxybutynin, and the strong sleep aid, diphenhydramine. I remembered one Tuesday, 3 weeks ago. Sarah was late. I missed my evening dose completely. I didn't sleep well, but the next morning I felt sharp. I found my reading glasses right on the kitchen table, where I knew I had left them. Not in the refrigerator, not on my head. The next night I took all the pills, and the next morning I stood in the hallway for 5 minutes, trying to remember which door was the bathroom. I had to test it. I couldn't tell Sarah I was doing this. She was watching me like a hawk. The next night I took my pill organizer to the bathroom. I took the first 7 pills. Then I looked at the little white one, the diphenhydramine that knocked me out. I put it in my mouth, took a sip of water and held it under my tongue. Sarah always stood outside the door, but she never checked my mouth. When I was alone, I spit the white pill into a crumpled napkin and hid it in my pocket. That night was restless. I tossed and turned, but when I woke up, the fog was only a haze, not a wall. I managed to make toast without burning it. I remembered to turn off the coffee machine. I kept doing this for 3 days, skipping the sleep aid. The headache was awful, but my mind was clearer. I could follow the news on TV. The dizziness was almost gone. I still felt scared, but I wasn't confused anymore. I needed to know what these pills were doing. I needed an expert who wouldn't call Sarah. There was only one person. I waited until the Saturday morning. Sarah said she was leaving for a volunteer shift at the hospital. 4 hours. That was all I needed. I wrapped the 7 remaining bottles of pills in one of my old silk scarves, The kind I used to steam press for the fancy ladies downtown. I put on my coat and walked across the street. Every step felt like a huge risk, but I knew that staying put was a death sentence. Mrs. Henderson opened her door. She was 78, lived alone, and was the sharpest woman I knew. She used to run the independent pharmacy before the big chain bought them out. "Margaret, dear, you look like you haven't slept in a week," Mrs. Henderson said, pulling me inside. I laid the scarf and the bottles on her clean kitchen table. My hands shook as I unwrapped them. "Sarah fills these for me," I whispered, the words scratching my throat. "They're supposed to help me, but I think they're making me sick, making me forget everything." Mrs. Henderson didn't say anything for a long time. She put on her glasses, the kind with 3 different magnifying strengths, and started studying the labels, one by one. She was a pharmacist, not just a cashier. She knew her labels. She frowned deeply. She looked at the date Dr. Jenkins prescribed the heart medicine. She checked the refill date on the heartburn pill. Then she stopped at 3 specific bottles: the little blue bladder pill, oxybutynin, the sleep aid I was skipping, diphenhydramine, and the depression pill that Sarah insisted I needed, paroxetine. Mrs. Henderson slid the bottles toward me, her face pale. She spoke low, almost a hiss. "Margaret, these 3 generics, they are extremely dangerous for anyone over 65. They are called high-level anticholinergics." I just stared at the ugly, simple names. "Anticholinergics, Margaret. They block signals in your brain. They are okay for a young person, but for someone our age, they cross the blood-brain barrier. They hit your memory center directly." She paused, taking a breath. "Taking just one of these is risky. Taking all 3, together? It's called polypharmacy abuse. That combination, according to the official guidelines, the AGS-Beers criteria, it increases the risk of cognitive decline and dementia by over 120% in a year." My breath hitched. I wasn't losing my mind. It was being stolen. "It mimics dementia perfectly, Maggie," she said, tapping the bottles. "It is drug-induced confusion. And the good news? It is mostly reversible if we act fast." I started to cry, silent tears streaming down my face. I wasn't crying because I was sad. I was crying because I was finally, truly, angry. My own daughter. She was medically poisoning me, and she knew. As a nurse's assistant, she had to know these basic rules. Mrs. Henderson pulled out a small spiral-bound notebook and a pen. "We stop this right now," she said, her voice firm, like a drill sergeant. "But we have to be careful. You never stop these drugs all at once, or you'll get very sick." She explained the plan. We would start by replacing the most immediate offender, the diphenhydramine sleep aid. It's a strong anticholinergic. We need something safer. We will swap it for loratadine, Claritin. It's an allergy pill, over the counter, the same price. But it doesn't cross into the brain. It won't clear your mind entirely, but it will let you think clearly enough to fight back. Mrs. Henderson gave me a small plastic bag filled with tiny white tablets. "Every night, Margaret, you swap the sleeping pill Sarah gives you for this one, and every 3 days, you come here. I'm going to give you a memory test, the mini-cog test. We will track your progress." I went home, my body shaking, but my mind suddenly clear. The heavy, paralyzing fear was replaced by a cold, sharp resolve. Sarah wanted a frail, forgetful mother. I would give her one, but only until I had the evidence. I started my secret recovery that very evening. When Sarah handed me the pill organizer, I swallowed all 8 pills, including the replaced ones. I kept acting confused and frail. I dropped the salt shaker at dinner. I pretended I couldn't find the TV remote. I even looked for my keys in the freezer, just to watch that look of cold satisfaction spread across Sarah's face. "Oh, Mom," she'd sigh, shaking her head. "You really are getting worse, aren't you? It's time for that nursing home consultation." Inside, I was screaming, but outside, I was the perfect, pathetic victim. My mind started to come back online. The clarity was gradual, but every day felt like I was swimming up from a deep, dark well. 2 weeks later, Mrs. Henderson ran the mini-cog test again. "You started at 19, Margaret," she whispered, looking at her notes. "Most hospitals consider anything under 20 a serious problem. Today?" She smiled broadly. "Today you scored 23. You've climbed out of the dangerous zone. Keep going, dear. You live and learn. Portwana." The improvement was fast enough to be undeniable, but slow enough that Sarah wouldn't notice immediately. I was thinking clearly, but I was still acting confused. I knew Sarah and Gary's deadline was 3 weeks away, the day they planned to force the power of attorney and sell the apartment for 210 Surazor dollars. I needed hard proof of their conspiracy. I remembered hearing Sarah mention meeting Gary at St. Mary's Hospital cafeteria. Sarah worked there part-time as a nurse's assistant, and Gary, her lawyer friend, must have met her there during her break. I found my old digital voice recorder. It was small, old, and reliable, the kind you could hide easily. The following Tuesday, Sarah kissed me goodbye and rushed out, saying she had an extra long shift. I waited exactly 15 minutes. Then I drove my ancient Ford Focus. I hadn't driven in 3 months, terrified of causing an accident. But the anticholinergics were out of my system. I was steady. I was precise. I was Maggie Miller again. I parked far from the hospital entrance and walked slowly toward the side entrance of the cafeteria. I found a pillar near a small potted plant where I could hide, clutching the recorder in my pocket. It only took 10 minutes for them to arrive. Sarah and Gary sat at a booth, their heads bent low. I pressed the record button. Gary's voice was sharp and professional. "The appraisal is set for Friday. If she fails the final competency exam we scheduled with Jenkins next week, we can file the power of attorney without resistance. The house is valued at $210,000, Sarah. We just need her to hold the line for 3 more weeks." Sarah sounded stressed. "She's not declining fast enough, Gary. She asked me about the house deed yesterday. She's getting lucid. I swear if she doesn't sign those papers before her memory comes back, we lose everything." I pulled the recorder closer, shivering despite the cafeteria's heat. They weren't waiting for me to fail. They were actively trying to manage my decline. They were terrified of my recovery. "Jenkins says the new high-dose booster will fix it," Sarah muttered. "He said it will put her under for a week. We need her to sign the papers Friday, right after the appraisal." I turned off the recorder, my hand numb. The pain of the betrayal was immense. They weren't just neglecting me. They were planning my mental collapse using medical force, and Dr. Jenkins was in on it, supplying the drugs. I drove home, locking the recording away inside the huge, heavy base of my old steam press in the basement. Sarah would never touch that messy old thing. The next day, Sarah walked in, radiating tension. She placed an extra pill on the kitchen counter, a large, chalky white one, unlabeled. "Dr. Jenkins called," she announced, her voice too sweet. "He says your anxiety is flaring up. He wants you to take this high-dose booster tonight. It will help you sleep better." My gut seized up. This was the booster they mentioned. Mrs. Henderson had warned me about this type. Antipsychotics. Drugs like that caused 71% more cognitive decline in 12 months. Sarah was trying to force a mental crash before Friday. I looked her in the eye, trying to hide my sharp clarity. "Oh, Sarah, thank you. I do feel so worried all the time." I swallowed the pill, or rather, I replaced it quickly with a crushed antacid tablet I had hidden in my sleeve. I swallowed the safe chalky powder and faked a sigh of relief. "That's better," I slurred, pretending to drift off right there in the chair. Sarah relaxed. She thought she had won. "I'll tell you what." She thought wrong. I started my next phase immediately. I didn't just need to stop the bad pills. I needed to reverse the damage fast. Mrs. Henderson and I met secretly again. I showed her the new chalky pill, and she nearly gasped. "This is criminal, Margaret. We need to boost your body's natural defenses right now. If they think you're getting lucid, they'll push harder." She taught me simple things, practical things, the things they don't teach you in medical school, unless you're truly focused on aging bodies. The key to fighting drug-induced confusion is reversing the inflammation and boosting blood flow, she explained. Your high blood pressure is also hurting your memory, Maggie. She gave me a simple test. Go home, measure your pressure, then do this. Sit with your feet in water that is comfortably warm, not hot, for exactly 15 minutes. I did it that evening. My blood pressure, the one I took pills for, was high, 170/100. I sat with my feet in the tub of warm water for 15 minutes, relaxing. I dried them off. I measured again. 154/92. My Lord, I whispered to myself. I had reduced my pressure by 16 points just by soaking my feet. No pills, no doctor. Mrs. Henderson added a second trick. Deep breathing. 4 seconds breathe in, 4 seconds hold it, 4 seconds breathe out, 4 seconds wait. Do that for 2 minutes, she instructed. I did it. My pressure dropped another 6 points. I started doing the foot soak and the breathing exercises 3 times a day, diligently recording the numbers in the small notebook Mrs. Henderson had given me. I also made a secret appointment with a different clinic for blood work. I knew Sarah would try to intercept mail, so I asked the lab to fax the results directly to Mrs. Henderson's private number. The results came back the next day. My vitamin B12 levels were low. Mrs. Henderson explained, diphenhydramine, the sleep pill, it messes with B12 absorption. Low B12 looks exactly like dementia, Margaret. Sarah knows this. It's cheap to fix. I started taking 1,000 micrograms of vitamin B12 every day. It was another thing Sarah couldn't stop, because it was just a vitamin. With the anticholinergics gone, my pressure controlled and my B12 restored, my mind didn't just clear, it sharpened. The old seamstress's precision was back. I went to my bank. I didn't file the power of attorney yet, but I updated the beneficiaries on all my accounts, naming Mrs. Henderson as an emergency contact and excluding Sarah completely. I secured a hard copy of the deed to the apartment. I put the deed inside my old family Bible. That was the last place Sarah would ever look. The final piece of their plan was set for Friday. The appraisal. I kept up the act. I stumbled. I mumbled. I wore mismatched socks. I was the picture of frailty. I wanted them to be overconfident. I wanted them to think they had succeeded. Friday morning, the day of the appraisal, I was sitting in my favorite recliner pretending to doze. I had my 3 sets of blood pressure readings for the week, and my improved mini-cog scores tucked into the lining of my coat. Sarah walked in, holding a clipboard and a legal folder labeled Property Transfer. Gary was right behind her, smooth and cold in a cheap suit. "Mom, good news," Sarah said. her voice cloyingly sweet. "Gary is here with the appraiser. Just a quick signature on this release form, and we can get started. It's a lot of money, Mom. You need to focus. Just sign here." I opened my eyes slowly, letting my gaze drift around the room before settling on the paper. I picked up the pen Gary offered, my hand shaking violently, deliberately signing a looping, illegible scrawl right across the signature line, a perfect sign of a confused, failing mind. Sarah beamed, snatching the paper away. "Perfect. Now you just sit tight. The appraiser will be here soon. We're getting you set up for the future, just like we planned." She turned to leave, heading for the front door to greet the appraiser and finalize the paperwork with Gary. "Sarah!" I called out, my voice clear and startlingly strong, cutting through the silence of the hallway. She stopped dead, halfway down the hall, her head slowly turned back towards me. "Yes, Mom." Her smile was still plastered on, but her eyes held fear. "Did you remember the comprehensive medication review I requested?" I asked, my gaze completely lucid, fixing her to the spot. "You know, the one at the pharmacy next door?" Sarah's face drained of all color. She had intercepted the mail, and she thought she'd crushed that request weeks ago. "What are you talking about, Mom? You didn't request anything," she hissed, clutching the folder tighter, the mask finally cracking. I leaned forward in my recliner, no longer trembling. "Oh, but I did, dear. And guess who's meeting me there in 30 minutes to discuss that 120% cognitive decline risk those 3 specific pills caused." Sarah lunged forward, not toward me, but toward the phone on the small table. She knew I had reached out. The conspiracy was collapsing right in front of her. Sarah had planned 3 weeks of calculated poisoning. I had just compressed the final confrontation into the next 30 minutes, and the only thing standing between her and the $210,000 was the little old lady who wasn't confused anymore. "Before we continue, tell me where you're watching from. I'd love to know how far this story will travel." Maggie did not wait for Sarah's reaction. The moment the color drained from her daughter's face, Maggie stood, her movements slow but deliberate, retrieved her car keys from the ceramic jar on the mantel, a place Sarah thought Maggie had forgotten, and walked straight out the door. I moved with a purpose Sarah hadn't seen in months, crossing the street to the independent pharmacy next door, Henderson's Chemist, the place Sarah had deliberately avoided. Sarah and Gary, their scheme instantly shredded, rushed out moments later, nearly colliding with the appraiser who was entering the building, bewildered by the commotion. Inside the pharmacy, I was already seated in the quiet, comprehensive medication review consultation room. Mrs. Henderson was there, along with the attending pharmacist, Mr. Davies, a young man who ran the independent pharmacy now. Sarah burst through the inner door, followed by Gary, both radiating raw panic. "Mom, what is this nonsense? We need to go home. We have the appraiser waiting." Sarah's voice was high-pitched, strained and desperate, a terrible imitation of concern. I looked calmly at Sarah, then at Gary. "The appraiser can wait. This review is covered by Medicare Part D, and I need to know why I've been feeling so confused for 8 months." I had walked in leaning slightly, playing the part of the frail, elderly woman Sarah expected. Now, I straightened my spine. I lifted my chin. I no longer looked like a victim. The change must have been terrifying for them, because Gary took an involuntary step back. Mr. Davies, the pharmacist, a professional third party, opened my file. "Mrs. Miller, we reviewed your regimen of 8 daily medications, specifically the combination of oxybutynin, diphenhydramine, and paroxetine, all highly anticholinergic. He looked directly at Sarah, his gaze severe. As a nurse's assistant, Sarah, you should be aware of the AGS Beers criteria for elderly patients. Sarah tried to interrupt. That's standard protocol. Mom is old and... I cut her off, my voice firm. No, Sarah, it's not. Mr. Davies, please share the data we discussed. Mr. Davies continued, unfazed. This specific high-risk cocktail is clinically known to increase cognitive decline risk by over 120%. It mimics severe dementia. It is drug-induced confusion, potentially reversible. He gestured toward my file, detailing how my recent mini-cog scores had dramatically improved from a worrisome 19 to a clear 23, after Mrs. Henderson began the controlled deprescribing using the safer loratadine substitute. Gary stepped forward, attempting intimidation. He was smooth and sharp, even sweating. This is hearsay, Mrs. Miller signed the power of attorney release this morning. We need proof she wasn't competent when she signed that form. I smiled, a thin, knowing smile that chilled Sarah to the bone. About that signing, Gary. I may have signed the release form, but I signed it with a pen that had no ink. I reached into my purse and lifted the small digital recorder I had hidden beneath the lining. But I did get a genuine signature from you both. On this. I pressed the play button. The small room filled with the cold, calculating voices of Sarah and Gary. The house is valued at $210,000, Sarah. We just need her to hold the line for 3 more weeks. Jenkins says the new high-dose booster will fix it. He said it will put her under for a week. We need her to sign the papers Friday, right after the appraisal. The sound of their casual, planned cruelty hung in the air. Mr. Davies's eyes widened in shock. Mrs. Henderson simply nodded, confirming what she already knew. Sarah lunged forward, instantly dropping the mask of the caring daughter. She didn't go for the recorder, but toward me, her face twisted with fury and desperation. Mom, don't! We can fix this! I am your only family. Think about what you're doing. You can't turn your back on me. I'm your daughter. Tears, real tears of self-pity, began to stream down her face. The silence hung heavy, broken only by the faint recording finishing its loop. Mr. Davies was already dialing the local police department on the consultation room phone. I looked into Sarah's eyes, not with rage, but with a profound, terrifying emptiness. I spoke slowly, every word landing like a hammer blow. I worked 30 years at the Des Moines laundromat, pressing silk and scrubbing grime, to buy that 2-bedroom apartment. I worked hard for every stitch of it. I paused, letting my history settle between us. You tried to poison my brain with 3 specific anticholinergic pills and a dangerous antipsychotic booster, gambling on a 120% cognitive decline risk. All for the $210,000 in equity. My voice dropped, clear and final. My daughter died when she chose those pills over my life and my clarity. You are a stranger with her face, obsessed with money. I stopped loving that stranger the moment she calculated my mental collapse. Within minutes, 2 plainclothes officers arrived. Gary immediately tried to argue his way out, citing legal privilege, but he was detained. Sarah, weeping hysterically and screaming denial, was placed in handcuffs. The legal folder containing the inkless signed form and the property transfer documents was seized as primary evidence. As Sarah was led away, she kept screaming one single desperate word: money. The evidence against Sarah and Gary was irrefutable. The audio recording provided the intent. The pharmacist's testimony regarding the beer's criteria provided the medical malpractice, and the documentation of my clear recovery once the anticholinergics were removed proved the harm. Sarah was charged with felony elder abuse, financial fraud, and attempted vehicular assault, since my earlier confusion had caused several documented near misses while driving, and attempted homicide due to the documented risks of the drug cocktail, which included the late-stage antipsychotic booster. Gary was charged with conspiracy and fraud. The conviction was swift and brutal. Sarah was sentenced to 10 years of federal prison time in a closed facility. She was immediately stripped of her nurse's assistant certification, rendering her unemployable in the medical field upon release, and she lost all her professional licenses. Gary received a slightly shorter sentence but faced similar ruin. Both were jointly ordered to pay me restitution and substantial punitive damages totaling $300,000, significantly more than the apartment's worth. Sarah's social ruin was complete. Family members, appalled by the audio evidence, cut off all ties. She now resides in a federal correctional institution, isolated and without contact from any relative. The justice was swift and poetic. Sarah had calculated everything around securing the $210,000 of equity in my apartment by managing my decline. Instead, she lost her freedom, her profession, her future earnings, and was forced to pay me even more than the apartment's value. 2 years later, the heavy fog that once enveloped my life is gone completely. I am 73 now, vibrant, sharp, and constantly moving. I walk every morning for 40 minutes and have lost 15 pounds. My blood pressure, which was dangerously high at 170, over 100 under Dr. Jenkins' regime, is now consistently 118/76. I no longer need the heart medication he prescribed, only a simple, safer tablet for occasional heartburn. My mini-cog score reached 27, classifying me as fully competent and vibrant. I realized my life's purpose was no longer retirement, but advocacy. I used $150,000 of the restitution money to establish the Beers Project, a local foundation named after the AGS criteria that saved my life. The foundation's mission is simple: to train seniors and their caregivers on the dangers of polypharmacy and anticholinergic drug cocktails. The apartment Sarah coveted became the organization's office and meeting space. I now serve as the lead lecturer at local community centers and church groups. I, along with Mrs. Henderson, host weekly workshops teaching hundreds of seniors how to demand a comprehensive medication review and how to reverse mild cognitive decline using simple non-pharmacological methods. When I first tried the foot bath and the breathing, I often tell my classes, holding up the small notebook where I tracked my pressure. My blood pressure was 170. Mrs. Henderson told me to sit with my feet in warm water for 15 minutes. That night it dropped 16 points. I paused, letting the number sink in. No doctor, no pill. Just water and 15 minutes. We've taught over 500 seniors these simple tricks. Sarah tried to convince me my body was failing, but my body just needed the right kind of care, not more poison. I never rebuilt a relationship with Sarah. Some damage cannot be stitched back together, but I found a deep, loyal friendship with Mrs. Henderson. We travel together now, giving presentations in neighboring states, fully embodying the strength of two women who refuse to be forgotten. I often look at the apartment deed, now framed on the wall of the Beers Project office. The room is sunny and filled with laughter from the group of seniors learning breathing exercises. I walk over and touch the frame, the paper warm beneath my fingers. Sarah wanted my death to secure her future. Ironic, isn't it? She tried to steal my life with 3 little pills, but instead she taught me the value of consciousness. The quiet victory of the recovered mind is stronger than any prison sentence or any stolen money. The quietest, most perfect revenge is simply to live long enough to find your own cure And if you stayed with me until the end, leave a comment letting me know what you thought of the story and what kinds of stories you'd like to read more of. Thank you so much for being here. See you in the next emotional story.